Welcome to Scuba Diver Live. We're back for another live stream that hopes to inspire and educate, as well as bring a little bit of humour into your lives for an hour this evening. If you like what we're doing, remember to hit that subscribe button, ring that bell so you don't miss any of our future installments. Please leave us any comments, what you like, what people you'd like to see, and we'll do our best to oblige in the future. If you're watching us live, remember, if you've got any questions for our guests tonight, fire them over and we'll do our best to throw them all at them at the end of the show. Just before we get to our guests, big shout out to Scuba Diver dry gloves. As we said, probably one of the most popular dry glove systems on the market, very easy to use. You can get them factory fitted on certain dry suits, or you can retrofit them to your existing suit. So if you want warm hands when you're diving in cold water, check them out. Right, so on with today's show, and we've got a real Mexican feel this time because we've got two Brits who've made Mexico their home in the sun. First up, we've got Lanny Vogel. Lanny is a full-time cave instructor with his wife Claire. He's the owner of Underworld Tulum, which is a purpose-built centre right in the middle of cave country, and they've got accommodation for divers and everything. He was previously a commander in the Royal Navy, and apparently he retired in 2014 to prevent work getting in the way of cave diving, which I think is a very wise decision. So without further ado, let's bring Lanny on. Hi, mate. How are you doing?
Hey, Mark. How are you, buddy? Yeah, pretty good.
How's the weather out in Mexico?
Yeah, pretty warmish. Just getting into hot seas. We had a bit of a thunderstorm last night, so I was a bit worried that was going to knock the internet out, but loud and clear, so all good.
That's great, mate. That's great. Well, just getting things started before we get down how we ended up in Mexico is what got you first into diving? I know we mentioned that you were a commander in the Royal Navy, but were you diving recreationally before that, or was it when you got into the military that it got you into diving?
Well, I kind of got into diving by accident. We were supposed to be going skiing about over 20 years ago, and somebody dropped out on the Thursday. The only holiday we could get was in Cyprus, and it was sort of March, early Easter. Diving had always been on the bucket list, so we managed to get an entire rugby front row through a diving course. And having tried it once, I loved it, and it all got a bit out of hand and sort of progressed from there. There was quite a bit. I did start doing some sports diving through the military, and before I left the Navy, I was the expeditions officer for Navy and Marine Sub-Aqua, so I did spend a bit of time diving for fun or adventurous training, as the military like to call it.
Cool. So were you, obviously, so it was like you really got into your diving from that impromptu start, should we say, supposedly going skiing, ended up diving. I like it. Did you go into being an instructor before you got into the Royal Navy, or was that something that came afterwards?
No, it was, as I said, sort of adventurous training is something that the military do very well. So send you off for a couple of weeks a year to get you out of your comfort zone. And there's a really good path to go through the sort of BZAC route within the military. So I went down to Joint Services was in Bovey back then, but now my friend Don Robinson runs it out of the dockyard in Plymouth, and went and did my sort of BZAC instructor course, having done a bit of diving before. I said that means it's quite nice. You can get away and get some diving in for a couple of weeks a year, as well as doing my sort of full-time job as an officer in the Navy.
Yeah, makes sense. So you started off with BZAC and you got your instructor with that. I noticed that you have got an absolute raft of qualifications with all manner of training agencies. Did you start getting some of those before the Royal Navy, or did they all come when you left?
Well, I was doing. I did my original course with Paddy, sort of on holiday on leave from the Navy with a couple of friends. Sort of crossed over to BZAC to do the sort of military sports diving thing, and then really, I've certainly for the technical diving, I don't really see it's more about the instructor and the course. I did a lot of stuff when I first sort of got into technical diving with Izzy Empset down in Portland. I did the second GUE fundies in the UK when Jared came over in sort of 2002, 2003. I know John Kendall, who was only a previous guest, was a fellow student on that course, so sort of gives you an idea about how long ago that was. And really for the stuff people I'm sort of teaching for out here, teaching K for INTD, TDI and RAID, really was picking the instructor trainer that I wanted to work with. And with the raid stuff. Steve Lewis is a good friend of ours who comes out quite a lot, and obviously Paul Toom and I go back quite a long way, so it's great to support raid as well.
Yeah, well, that's good. And the thing is, like you say, because you've got the ability to offer all of those, you know, when anyone comes out, it doesn't really matter which training agency they want to go with. You can probably service what they're after. So that's nice to see.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you've ended up in cave country. But before we get to that, when did your interest in cave diving in particular start?
Well, kind of, you know, cave diving was always seen as a sort of almost a very specialised form of tech diving and requiring a lot more training and precision. And always had a bit of a, being a sort of an early GUE adopter, always had a bit of a desire to do some cave training, and ended up getting the opportunity after an operational tour. I think I just spent 6 months in Baghdad or somewhere horrific. Got a bit of time off after that, and came out here to Mexico to do my cave course, and just fell in love with it. So the following year, I managed to trick my wife into coming here on a honeymoon, and she did her cave course as well, and it became my sort of default holiday destination after that. Cool.
Is there anywhere else that you've been cave diving?
I have, yeah. Malta is fairly limited there, but pretty reasonable. And then I spent a bit of time in Florida, which is obviously where a lot of the sort of cave diving we do kind of started. So yeah, I spent a bit of time in Florida, sort of diving the cave there as well.
Yeah, I get you. So I would imagine this next question is probably going to revolve around caves, but it was, what is your most memorable diving experience?
This was a really difficult one, actually, when they're sort of sending that through. I couldn't really come up with one. I think I'm going to go, so if you don't mind, I'm going to go with three. The first one was diving the wreck of the Bounty on a military expedition back in 2003. Took us about, I think, 8 days to get to Pitcairn Island, and we had a sort of 5 or 6 weeks out there doing that. So that was pretty amazing from a historical perspective. The caves out here are so amazing. You sort of, almost the last one you did is pretty memorable. But I'd probably say first time doing a sort of long scooter run to a place called the Blue Abyss, sort of multi-stage, multi-scooter dive. So it takes you just about 70 minutes on the trigger before you get there, which is pretty cool. And I think the other one, from an instructional perspective, the first time I took a cave student into the overhead, when it's like, wow, this is quite a serious undertaking here. So that was quite memorable and really, really satisfying to see someone operating well in the cave environment and know that you've been responsible for that training.
Yeah, no, that was cool. That's cool. Now, I know that you said there you fell in love with Mexico when you'd been, and you managed to persuade your wife to come out there on honeymoon, which I think is pretty epic that you managed to get her out there to get her hooked as well. But what was it that made you end up in Mexico? I know you said you became your default holiday location, but then you've actually made that your home. So what was it that was the absolute trigger for that?
I think it's really, we wanted to do something in diving, and I'm lucky to have 8 of the 10 biggest underwater cave systems in the world with about half an hour of where I'm standing now. I'm a dive centre. So there are so many caves here, even though at the moment most of the normal commercial cenotes are shut down. I can be 5-minute drive out into the jungle, and I can find somewhere to go diving. We are so lucky with the amount of cave that we have here. It's also quite a nice place to live. Reasonably good infrastructure, nice people, good weather, etc. So it's pretty much the perfect package.
Yeah, I did. And Tulum is, as I think you mentioned in your on your website, it's kind of the more laid-back, quieter version of Cancun, but it's still got that infrastructure, like you said. You've got the Mayan ruins, so it's a good holiday package destination, really. Because it's got a lot going for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of gone through. It was more about the hippies, so it was quite a bit of a sort of hippie trail sort of destination. Now it's got a bit more trendy, so it's gone from sort of hippies to hipsters, and a lot of there's a lot of sort of New York restaurants with outpost on the beach. We had Nobu had a pop up here for still bits of it that got that original sort of quite laid back hippie vibe. So it's a pretty nice place to be.
No, that is cool. So obviously you said you got into cave diving because it was the adventure side, but what is the real attraction for you of cave diving over, say, wreck diving or anything like that?
think it's very simple. I mean, the first thing, it's absolutely beautiful. Some of the formations, the speleotherms, they just take your breath away. They're sort of just absolutely beautiful. The water's very clear, so you just get the impression of these amazing formations. The other thing is the challenge and actually having to train reasonably hard to get to the level of skill to be able to safely execute some fairly complex dives. That can be quite satisfying. And I think the other thing is the exclusivity. So we get to go and see stuff that not all that many people have been to see.
Yeah, that's cool. Now, I know that you pretty much do everything. You do back mount, side mount, and you do rebreathers. Is there any, is it like, does it depend on which dive you're doing as to which equipment you'll use? I mean, I would imagine you use the rebreather if you're doing any longer ones. But does it also depend on some of them, their accessibility?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I'm not a sort of huge sort of side mount zealot or sort of back mount devotee. It really depends on the dive, and everything's a tool for a job, really. So if you're going to go somewhere that's sort of super small and wriggly, obviously then side mount's the right tool. If you're going to be going longer range, then rebreathers. And actually, although the caves here in Mexico are quite shallow, so the sort of cost benefit for a rebreather can sometimes be a little bit less than it would be in deeper caves. It's really nice to be able to sort of go out on one passage and then come back, and then go out on one passage and come back. So rebreather's going to be good there. And actually, we can add a scooter, and that makes everything a lot more fun as well.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, I can imagine the scooting around in some of those caves. I've seen the pictures with epically clear water and everything. So yeah, I can imagine the draw of that. Now, talking about caves and you bringing it to more people, you organise the Cave Camp event. Now, I know that sadly this year's event's been cancelled due to COVID-19. But tell us a little bit about how Cave Camp came into being, what its aims were, and we know that it's going to be back next year. Yeah,
so as you say, it's unfortunately we've had to quite sensibly postpone it this year's event until 2021. Basically, Cave Camp is 2 weeks of bringing some of the some instructors from all over the world, divers from all over the world, and it's 2 weeks of some people doing courses, some people just going for fun dives. Presentations, so we have some explorers, sort of fairly well-known people in the diving industry come to speak to us, and socials as well. We're really lucky that some of the big names in the diving industry support us. So Apex, Shearwater, Otter, Seacraft, Gareth at the Human Diver, and Raid have all very kindly sort of sponsored the event. So each social event gets sponsored by one of those people, so we can put on a really good feed and a really good show. It's just 2 weeks of sort of up to about 50 or so different cave divers from all over the world, just getting together, rubbing shoulders, going to go diving together, and having a lot of fun. So it's something we really look forward to, and it's a shame that we're having to postpone this one. But it's I think 2021 is going to be massive because everyone's going to be really missing the caves and missing their friends. So we're predicting quite a good one next year.
Yeah, no, it should be epic. Now, we've talked about your most memorable experience. Let's go for what is your funniest diving moment?
I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, actually, but when I was going through my training to be a cave instructor, my wife Claire, who's now also a cave instructor, was my sort of pretend buddy. And when you're sort of following the line, you've got to sort of keep your hand on the line, and your buddy is sort of pushing you whilst you're blindfolded into a tie-off, so you can read it, and then you read it and then go on to the next one. I was sort of gently pushing her into the sort of tie-off so she could read it, but she sort of got it into her head that I was slamming her into the rocks. And when we changed round, you could see her eyes just go, right, you're for it now. And basically spent about a minute just smashing me into this rock as hard as she could. And which time I haven't got a blindfold on. I'm looking over at my instructor trainer, and we're both absolutely wetting ourselves laughing. I think we both flooded our masks and had to cut the drill. But that was probably my funniest one.
Yeah, so at least you know now, don't annoy her. Especially
it's always problematic trying to train someone in your family, but it went all right. We both did okay. Both still alive.
Yeah, you both survived. That's what we like. Cool. Right, Lanny, don't go anywhere. We're just going to let you have a little rest in the green room. We're going to bring our second guest in, and then we'll have you back shortly. Our next guest is Luke Inman, our second Brit in Mexico. He's been a paddy course director for 19 years. He's taught scuba for over 2 decades, even though he still only looks like he's a kid. He's heavily into scientific diving as well, and he's also been involved in many documentary shoots for TV, plus a few Hollywood movies and stuff like that. Plus, he's the owner and operator of Cortez Expeditions, which is the only PADI 5-star IDC centre in La Paz. So without further ado, here's Luke.
Hello, mate.
Right, mate. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad. Thank you for inviting me.
It's good. It is sickening, though. You never seem to age.
I don't know. I don't know what to say.
It must be the Mexican air, mate. It does wonders for you.
Yeah, it is. It must be the lifestyle.
So, before we get into how you ended up in Mexico, because you've been there for a long time, but before we get into that, how did you first get into diving? And then what led you down the path to becoming a diving instructor? Because you're obviously 19 years as a PADI course director. That's pretty epic.
So, I did the standard, I think, I did the PADI open water back in 1992. And then while I was at university, I became a dive master. And I never imagined that I'd take the route into becoming an instructor. And Lanny just spoke about Fort Bothersand. I went and did my commercial diver part 4 and part 3 so I could work for the BBC and at Pinewood Studios as a media diver. And that was before the media diver qualifications. To show you how long ago it was, you had to do the full commercial part 4. So I spent 4 to 6 weeks at Fort Bothersand, and then I worked on a number of big feature films, which I'm sure you're going to mention a bit later. And then, like all things in the film industry, you go through these incredible moments of feast and then come incredible moments of famine. And I was out of work, and funnily enough, one of the camera assistants I work with, who is now an award-winning camera person from The Crown on Netflix, he wandered down to come and visit me at my flat down in Battersea, where I was living, and he lived the other side of the common. And he came into the flat and he went, "There's a dive centre opened up on Webb's Road. We should go and have a look." So I went in, and I was talking to this bloke who was standing all crooked behind the counter, telling me that he didn't have any work for a dive master, but he could put me on the IDC, the PADI IDC course the following week, and he'd give me a job if I passed it. That was Paul Toomer, the training director of RAID. And then he came behind the counter and asked me if I could help him remove the printer that was attached to his German parachute boot. And Paul and I have been friends ever since. That's how I became an instructor. I had no intention of ever becoming an instructor. And within 3 years of becoming a PADI instructor, I was a course director.
Really? So that's quite a rapid ascension to the peak.
Yeah, I had thousands of hours as a dive master and a commercial diver. And I had 300-400 certifications before I became a course director. But it was pretty rapid. And I was one of the youngest to ever get.
Say, what age were you when you became a course director?
I remember walking into the main room and being asked by one of the other candidates if I was dropping my dad off. So I was 25, 26. I was a very young course director.
That is a very young course director.
Yeah, and nobody takes me seriously still. So
it's your boyish good looks, mate. That's what it is.
Okay, well, thank you.
Now, you did mention about being involved in documentaries and film shoots and stuff. How did you actually end up getting into that? So be like a dive master, but then end up thinking, right, if I get my commercial course, I'm going to be able to get work doing that. I know you said it's like feast or famine, but to actually be able to do it and then doing something like that, what actually made you think to go that route?
Well, first of all, I did a degree in film, television, and scientific filmmaking at Bristol Poly. So I have a background in filmmaking. And I approached a couple of the studios. I approached a couple of cameramen. I had a good CV with good life credentials, and basically, I produced a couple of short films, and I produced a couple of things at film school that kind of didn't get me noticed. I kind of was a bit of a pain in the butt to a few people, and then kind of made sure that the right people got to see them. And you know, there's ways of getting in on media things. One is making your show reel. One is getting in. Now would be online. Back then it was about, you know, being in the classified listings for things like The Knowledge. There used to be this big spiral-bound book that you could publish that you were a certified media diver or a camera system for underwater. And the main thing is, believe it or not, although loads of people would love to do that kind of job because it, you know, sounds fantastic, there's always a shortage of good people to work underwater in the media that are correctly qualified.
Well, so you still think that that's something then that if there are people out there who are aspiring to do what you did, that it's still worth looking at that? It's not one of those areas that's got a surplus of talent.
I would say that the biggest mistake people make doing that is I do the media diving and I have the dive center. Those are my two sources of income. But a lot of people think that they just need to do media diving or be underwater in the media. And underwater in the media is like being the gingerhead stepchild. So you've got to do stuff on land. If you're going to shoot underwater, shoot on land. If you're going to be a photographer underwater, be a photographer on land. If you're going to work on documentaries underwater, work on documentaries on land. Because all you're doing is restricting yourself to less than 1 or 2% of what's out there. And that's
yeah, good advice. I see what you mean. Yeah, because a lot of these documentaries, as we know, even the likes of Blue Planet, Planet Earth, stuff like that, even the ones that are focused mainly underwater, they still have quite a lot of topside segments.
Of course.
And a lot of the other shoots, I can imagine, where the underwater element might be only 20%. So if you can also utilize your skills topside, it makes you more valuable to these shoots for people.
I can give you an idea. I can't tell you what it is, but at the moment, I'm working on something for Nat Geo, and I'm one of the producers, and everything's, obviously it's all frozen. Nobody's working on anything right now. But there's not a single underwater shot in this production. Everything is shot from drones. And it's got nothing to do with underwater. There are some marine species in it, but that gives you an idea. And this is going to be a major thing for Nat Geo. And there's absolutely no underwater in it whatsoever. Really?
So I know you can't tell us about it, but any ideas when that's out, or is that all kind of gone a little bit off tempo with the COVID-19 thing?
Nobody knows.
Yeah. So I was going to say, so that's kind of put it back.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, never mind. But that's still one to watch out for.
There we go.
So what's some of the other documentary shoots and stuff that you've been involved with that you could tell us that you were doing something on?
Okay, so just recently I finished being the dive safety officer and one of the field producers for Planet Earth 3 for the BBC, for all the segments that they shot in Mexico. I can't tell you what we were shooting, and I have no idea when it's coming out, but I know it's coming out soon. And I suppose you want me to mention Star Wars, don't you?
Well, that was the next thing I was going to get onto. I was just letting you do the documentaries and stuff first, but then I was going, you have preempted me there, because obviously you were involved with documentaries. I knew you'd been involved with Planet Earth and stuff, and the Blue Planet things. But yes, I know you've also been involved in some Hollywood movies, and most notably, one of them was Star Wars. And you brought a most unloved character to life in the underwater segment.
And what? Okay. So you want to hear that story? I was working on building the set and the blue screen to shoot the underwater sequences for Phantom Menace. And I was also allowed with a little, to show you how long ago it was like an HDV High 8 camera. So I was shooting some behind the scenes and I was taking some photographs on film, not digital, for Lucasfilms. And Industrial Light and Magic had created this chromed digital dome to help the editors and the special effects people create Jar Jar Binks. And after they'd done a couple of run-throughs with stuntmen and then with the actors, with Liam Neeson and Ewan McGregor, I was randomly floating in the water and was asked, could I put my camera down and could I scuba dive alongside the two Jedi Knights holding this glass chromed dome, so that basically I would be holding the head of Jar Jar Binks. So effectively, for all the underwater scenes, I was Jar Jar Binks.
See, a legend in the making there. But perhaps for the wrong thing, because everybody hates him. And it was but you were holding his head.
I was holding
bring me the head of Jar Jar Binks.
Yeah, I was just part of, helping create him. I wasn't responsible for his creation.
Well, we'll let you off, but that's still part of your epic legacy, mate, that you were the swimming head of Jar Jar Binks. Now, where you've ended up now, as we said, you're running Cortez Expeditions, but you weren't to start with. How did you end up on the Pacific coast of Mexico, of all places, from the UK?
Well, I'd always had this, a lot of people, they always talk about Cousteau. Cousteau this, Cousteau that. And I'd only ever seen one Cousteau program, and it was the one about the Sea of Cortez. And I was always amazed at how remote the Sea of Cortez was. And then I knew about Steinbeck's books, and it had always had this sort of, when people are discussing great football players or great rugby players, and then there's always somebody that has the last word. Oh, but what about this person? And it always seemed to me that the Sea of Cortez, people were like, oh, you've got to go to the Maldives, the Red Sea, cave diving in Mexico, cave diving in Italy, tech diving in Malta, like all these different things. And everyone genuinely likes them for different reasons. But there was always this little thing in the back of my head that was like, oh, the Sea of Cortez, Steinbeck, Cousteau, and all these big pelagic animals. So it always had this sort of romantic connection for me. So I came out here in 2001 after a couple of visits to live. And I worked for another dive center very successfully for about 4 years. And then I worked exclusively in media diving and film and stuff for a little while. But again, that comes and goes. And so about 5 years ago, we opened a dive center, Cortez Expeditions. And here it is. And we're the #1 listed on TripAdvisor. And we're very, very small. We only have one boat. We only deal with 4 to 6 divers. We do 4 or 5 IDCs a year. We do 2 or 3 Trimix courses a year. We do 3 or 4 big tech courses a year. We do a lot of open water, a lot of dive masters. And we're just this little boutique dive center on the Sea of Cortez. And it was just that romantic notion of, reef fish that you can see in Panama combined with, a whale that's come down from the Arctic. It's just the most incredible mixture of ecology, the Sea of Cortez. It really is. It's not like anywhere else on Earth. It's completely unique.
Well, it must have definitely had an attraction to keep you there for nigh on 20 years.
Sea lions, mate.
Sea lions, that's it. I was just going to ask you that. That was probably the one that would fit in with my next thing, was your most memorable diving experience, and I could almost guarantee that sea lions would be involved somewhere.
Well, I've had a lot, and I recently on another sort of chat thing spoke about something else, but I'm going to talk about, I think the most important one is the consistency of those sea lions at our local dive site, Los Islotes. There's a story I have of one that was tagged. The university used to tag them under their fins. and there was this young female pup that had the number 42 tagged on her fins. So, you know, like life, the universe, and everything from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And this sea lion, she'd come and find me. If I was underwater, she'd come and play with me. And though they're just, it's like jumping into a bathtub with Labrador puppies. I mean, it's just enchanting. And, you know, I remember I was asked to take part in a diving magazine's feature about best dive sites. And I put Los Islotes, and everyone always expects that, you know, oh, you're going to mention, like, you know, some cenote cave system or some deep wreck or some technical dive. And no, 6 meters with the sea lions is just so memorable. And it's very easily achievable for everyone. I mean, you can do it snorkeling. They're just beautiful creatures.
And like you said, that's kind of your almost like a local site for you.
It's an hour and a half from the marina for us. It's almost the furthest part of the marine park. But considering La Paz is 300,000 people, and it's a city, and it's a 500-year-old city with an airport, and, you know, it's the capital of the state. To travel an hour and a half from, you know, 350,000 people and have an encounter with a wild animal like you get with these sea lions is pretty unheard of.
No, I was going to say that's quite impressive. It's kind of like the warm water, supersized version of the Farne Islands that we've got here in the UK. Pretty much, yeah. I mean, our water gets down to 20 degrees in the winter. It's, you know, it's lower California, and then in the summer it creeps up to 28, 30 degrees. So it's interesting diving here. We do dry suit or 5 mil in the winter, and then everyone's in 3 mil shorts in the summer. Yeah, big difference. Yeah, definitely big difference. Now, I know that we mentioned that you've been involved in some scientific diving projects and stuff as well. And I think, if I remember rightly, weren't you amongst the first in the world to be using rebreathers to go tagging hammerheads? That was correct. We pioneered, supposedly. We were very lucky. The end result of that research is we got the hammerhead listed as endangered in the Sea of Cortez. We also discovered a couple of the hammerheads we tagged broke some depth records. About 1,400 meters was one of the sharks dived to. That was very, very interesting. And it's very interesting to be involved in scientific diving because there's absolutely no money in it. There's no funding in it. And it's just incredible how a lot of these biologists operate. You know, you talk about artists loving what they do and not being compensated well. Some of the research scientists, it's just amazing how they manage to do some of the stuff they do. I mean, we basically lived on beans and rice for a year because there was no budget to keep the rebreathers running. But we were having such an incredible time and doing such groundbreaking stuff that it was, you know, it was unquestionably to this day one of the nicest jobs I've ever had. Yeah, I was going to say, I can imagine that one kind of standing out as a bit of a highlight. Who else can say that they've been playing around on rebreathers at depth with hammerheads? So, yeah, I can imagine that one being a bit of an icon moment. These were still rebreathers made in workshops, like home workshops as well. You know, we've been very lucky in the last 10, 15 years that rebreathers have become kind of standardized in their manufacture. But this was, you know, this is where the threads didn't even match on the hoses of the rebreathers we were using. I think that's described as being character building. Yeah. So just to round out, before we bring Lanny back on, we've had your most memorable moment, talked about the sea lions, everything. What's your funniest diving moment? You must have had some epic ones. I can think of one in particular. I was on the south coast of England running a course. And there were all the students there. And with another instructor, we very boldly, very brashly explained how to do a surf beach entry.
only to be picked up by the surf, thrown forward, lose half our gear, lose the mask, lose the snorkel, and be dumped in front of the students covered in sand, where all you could say was, and this is how you don't do it.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you could try and pull that one off, going, I was just demonstrating how not to do it.
Yeah.
You'd probably be all right, but I gathered they probably worked out that you just screwed up.
Yeah, they figured out that, that was, and my dry suit leaked, so I then had to complete the dive completely wet.
Ah, the good old days of UK diving.
But there's been plenty of embarrassing and stupid moments for me underwater. But
maybe we could do an epic episode, mate, of just that.
There we go. We could do some of my
the moment. Like it. Right, let's bring Lanny back in. All right, mate. How are you doing?
Yeah, good, mate.
Still there.
I had no idea Luke was so involved with Jar Jar Binks. He's gone up or down in my estimation. I'm trying to work out which one.
This was it, you see. This is why I decided that needed to be brought to wider attention.
Well, thank you for ruining my reputation.
So, as we said, you're both in Mexico. One of you's on the Pacific side and one of you's on the Caribbean side. And they've both got very different attractions. But given that at the moment we're in the middle of this COVID-19 pandemic and traveling has been stopped, as things open back up again and people are able to start traveling, give us a little rundown on why you think Mexico would be a great hotspot for them to come and see you, what some of the main attractions are. Let you go first, Lanny.
I think, the main thing to alluded to earlier is we've got so much fantastic overhead diving right on our doorstep. I love diving in Florida, but pretty much everywhere, no matter where you stay, is sort of 45 minutes, an hour away. Whereas I can be in a plethora of different dive sites within 10 minutes of my front door. It's not just for sort of hardcore cave divers. We can do, or we sort of regularly do, a big part of the industry here is guided cavern diving. So that's a sort of controlled exposure to the overhead environment, limited in penetration, but you still get to see some of the really, really beautiful things. So it's, and that's pretty unique compared to anywhere else in the world, that you can actually go and see some of these beautiful formations as an open water diver, obviously with a well-qualified cave guide. The other nice thing here is it's actually quite nice. It's quite a good sort of tourist area. So that Cancun is an hour and a half up the road, so that's where people fly into. So the tourist infrastructure in general is pretty decent. And we often have, we basically operate a crash facility for non-diving spouses with or without tequila. So we'll often just put them by the swimming pool with a puppy and a book and a glass of cold beer whilst their husband or wife comes diving with us. So it's a pretty nice place to be.
Yeah, and also I saw that you have the topside attractions and stuff too there, because you've got the Mayan ruins that are reasonably near you and everything as well. So if people want a little bit of topside culture, you've got that too.
Yeah, exactly. There's you've got the ruins at Coe just down the road. The ruins at Lima are really nice. There's all sorts of ecotourism is big here as well. So what I think called the Shankan Biosphere, so you can go and look at the manatees and the bird life and everything. It's pretty cool.
Cool. So Luke, over to you. Your side of the of Mexico.
One of the unfortunate things for Mexico, but potentially very good for tourism, is the peso is about to collapse. So things are going to be very cheap here soon. The peso has lost 25% of its value, so you'll get a lot of bang for your pound. The other thing is I spoke, I believe, yesterday with some of the reps. One company that still plans to fly direct to Cancun and to Cabo San Lucas is TUI. Looks like they will survive the COVID thing. But in terms of why to come to the Sea of Cortez, well, first of all, we have sea lions. You can't beat that. That's just fantastic. We're also an incredible staging post if you're planning to dive Socorro. If you come all the way to dive Socorro for 10 days on a liveaboard, you should do La Paz for at least 2 or 3. Guadalupe as well. If you plan to go cage diving, come and see us for 2 or 3 days. And La Paz is this beautiful old 500-year-old colonial city. It's got beautiful bars and restaurants and this boardwalk that stretches the whole part of the sort of downtown seafront. The marine park where we dive was just voted within the top 10 of all managed marine parks in the world. And I know there's a lot of places in the world you go places and you see bits of plastic floating and you see this horrible indictment of how humans interact with the natural world. But here in La Paz, the island, the marine park of Espiritu Santo is flawless, it's spotless. It's incredibly well managed. They stopped giving out permits 2 years ago to operators. They restrict the amount of people that can operate in the park. So it's pretty pristine. And again, if you want to come to us in the winter, when it's really cold in England, if you come between the months of December, January, March, you've got grey whales, blue whales, finback whales, humpbacks, a whole bunch of stuff. We've got the largest prehistoric cave paintings on this continent. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff, but I would just come for the sea lions, personally.
I think you should rename Cortez Expeditions to Sea Lion Expeditions at this rate. It's definitely the promo. So, for this is a question for both of you. Go with Lanny first. What sort of level do people want to be when they come? I mean, I know obviously you both do instruction and stuff like that, but do you think there's enough diving for people if they just want to come as fairly novice divers and just dive? Is there enough to keep them occupied, or is it mainly for experienced divers? What sort of blend have you got?
Yeah, I mean, for the cavern tours, which is probably the biggest part of our business, we can have any level of diving. What we tend to do is sort of tailor it. So we will take people to the easier caverns first, give them a little bit of coaching, make sure their trim and buoyancy is okay, and then we can maybe take them to some of the sort of slightly more advanced caverns. One thing we do, the normal sort of industry ratio is sort of 4 divers to 1 guide. Personally, for underworld, I like to keep that to 3 to 1 for safety, and it's also a little bit more enjoyable rather than being at the back of a big line of divers. So yeah, I mean, we can do any sort of level of diving. Not all of the cenotes, like the deep sinkholes, will be open to everybody. But if people do want to get up to that level, then we can offer a little bit of training there as well. So yeah, I mean, it can be everything from open water divers right the way through to people who want to do some cave training or even sort of advanced training and CCR training.
Cool. Luke, what about over on your side of the country?
Well, I mean, we do a lot of, like, 2 of the main attractions that you can do with us, which is the big aggregations of Mobula Manta and the sea lions. You could dive, then a spouse or a partner could snorkel at the same time. So you could come here as an open water diver or to get certified. And to the same degree, if you want to bring a scooter and do a normoxic trimix dive with a scooter between the 2 main seamounts where all the schooling hammerheads are, we can organize that as well. There is something for everyone. I think I would recommend, if you are a novice, I would come towards the end of the year where the water is at its warmest and its bluest. But yeah, I mean, we pretty much offer a little something for everyone, from open water all the way through to advanced expedition trimix if you want.
And one thing I was going to ask, with you both being on the opposite sides of the country and everything, what are the links like with internal flights and stuff? Is it feasible for people to maybe do a week on one side and then fly over and do a week on the other, or is that an absolute nightmare to try and organise? Do that to Luke first.
There's a couple of very good discount internal airlines here in Mexico. One called Volaris, the other one called Interjet. I don't know if Interjet's going to survive this COVID thing, but if you can fly to Cancun, or if you can fly to Cabo San Lucas or Mexico City, or Atlanta seems to be a pretty good hub with Delta, you're an hour and a half on 2 flights, or 2 flights of 3 hours in total. So you could go and see Lanny in Cancun at the airport, and then catch a plane Cancun, Mexico City, La Paz, and you could do that for under $400 or $500 per person. Sometimes as cheap as $300 or less, and it takes a little bit more than a morning or an afternoon. It's not a full 24 hours of travel, but it's 3 hours in a plane. But it's achievable.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking that was a good thing. And Lanny, have you ever had anyone doing that sort of thing?
No, well, I'm definitely gonna come and see the sea lions. I really want to come and see it. We're meaning to come over and see Luke for ages. Obviously, we're quite busy here with running the dive centre and rescuing dogs and all the other stuff. But once all this COVID nonsense is over, I'd love to come and see these guys see some whales and some sea lions and some big pelagic life. Be good to catch up, buddy.
Yeah,
well, that's what led me on to the next thing. Was obviously this COVID-19 pandemic has kind of put the kibosh on a lot of things. We've already mentioned that Cave Camp had to be postponed until next year. But really, it was like, what does the future hold for you? But obviously, that's probably a little bit up in the air due to this. But as far as you can, what have you got coming up? That you're aiming to do, or what people can do with you. Lanny, go to you first.
Well, I mean, it's pretty hard at the moment, and I finished teaching my last cave course sort of first week in March, and we've had no income since then. So we're obviously trying to economise as much as possible. We are still getting out within the sort of small socially distanced community. Me and my dive centre manager go out, try and get out once a week, just to keep our skills nice and fresh. But we're really waiting on stuff to open up again. We're hoping that we've got a group from the US coming out maybe July time. But at the moment, we're just kind of waiting until we can start sort of generating some income again. As soon as we can open, then we will, both the accommodation and the diving. But it's very much dependent on, firstly, the Mexican government and how quickly they're going to open stuff up, and also international flights and the quarantine rules for people returning to other countries. We have had some announcements that some hotels are going to be opening up here sort of 1st of June, but the Mexican government has said they're going to concentrate on internal tourism rather than international. So, like many people, we're kind of waiting to see what's going to happen, and just hope everybody. Obviously, the main thing is to keep everybody safe. So we're not going to take any silly risks, but it'll be nice to get back diving and teaching again. Yeah,
for sure. What about you, Luke?
Well, pretty much what Lanny said. I mean, we're trying to keep all our employees. And we're trying, obviously, the most important thing is the safety of everybody before anything else. There was an announcement today from the governor of Baja Sur that realistically they are giving permissions for some hotels and businesses under certain conditions to reopen on the 1st of June. But there's no flights, there's no tourists. There is a desire to focus on national tourism. But again, there's not really many national flights at the moment. And I think realistically, we're telling people middle of July, we've got a couple of courses. We've got an instructor course scheduled for August with exams, providing, everything falls into place. We signed up today for the government's stamp and approval for us being, clean and healthy for preventing the spread of COVID-19 within our business. And it's just a waiting game. I think we'll see the buzzword is the new normal. And I think sort of middle of July, end of July, we'll start to see some kind of, but I think until people see flights and planes leaving, I can understand. What I do think will change once all of this is over is I think people will visit us for a longer time. And I think people may even consider working from their Airbnb and that kind of stuff. We certainly seem to have a lot of people interested in becoming dive masters and instructors.
I get you. Yeah, so you're thinking that that's maybe the way it's going.
Yeah, I think so.
Cool. Sounds good. All right, well, let's just go to one of the questions that we had from a viewer, which was from Sean Finney, which was, what was your worst diving experience? We've had your most memorable, your funniest. He wants to know your worst diving experience. So, Lanny, we'll let you go first.
I'm trying to think, actually. I tend to quite like being in the water, so I don't tend to think that and it's always good when you come back alive, and clearly as I'm standing here, that's happened on every single occasion so far. I think sort of sometimes when you get in some of the sort of smaller caves, and certainly sort of some of the smaller wiggly side mount diving, when you sort of get a bit stuck and think, no, this is a bit annoying, and maybe take sort of 5 minutes to free yourself and get out, but it's always fine in the end. I genuinely can't think of a particularly sort of bad diving experience.
Well, to be honest, the one that you had before, which was your most memorable one, about being rammed repeatedly into a rock by your wife, probably kind of fulfilled that one as well.
That's more sort of marriage experience than diving experience. I'd put that under there. So I put that in a different category.
What about you, Luke?
Again, like Lanny, I mean, I love being in the water. I can't think of any. There's definitely been moments when I've been horribly, horribly cold, and it's got nothing to do with equipment choices or bad decisions. I've just been in the water too long. I could tell you when I've been the most terrified I've ever been, like absolutely terrified, where I was doing a night dive with the Humboldt squid, and I was being smashed to pieces by them. And there was nothing I could do to stop their attack. I was wearing a chainmail suit, and I came out of the water black and blue, where their beaks, and they've been hitting me. And I remember looking up at the lights of the boat and thinking, I need a different job. This isn't right. I shouldn't be doing this. Because I really, the walls closed in. I thought I was going to be eaten for about 2 or 3 minutes. And I had a few scary bits in my commercial diver training, and I'm sure Lanny can tell you about what it's like to dive out of Fort Bothersand all those years ago. But other than that, no, I don't have a particular moment that stands out. I have a few moments of fear, but I think just being cold is always bad.
Yeah, I would have said cold, but also, yeah, that being munched by Humboldt squid probably isn't the top of anyone's list, I have to say.
Yeah, there's some moments where you're pleased you're wearing that chainmail suit.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, on that note about avoiding Humboldt squid, that was fantastic, and we'll just draw a line on this evening. Thank you very much for joining us, guys. It was a pleasure having you. So massive thank you to Luke and Lanny for joining us on the virtual sofa. Cheers, guys. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, mate. Lovely.
So final shout out for Scuba Dry Gloves. Like I said, if you want to keep your hands warm when you're in cold water, they are one of the easiest dry glove systems to use. So yeah, check out their website. They've got various different versions available. Basically, what have we got to say? No live stream this Friday because Ross is going to be busy with a baby soon. So any day now it's due. So we don't want to have a live stream on Friday when we might have to lose him halfway through. So basically, you can just watch us out on Tuesday. We've got Tim Clements coming back. We're going to be talking about citizen science. So the date for that is Tuesday, the 26th of May. So citizen science, how you can get involved. Luke mentioned how cool scientific diving was here. So we'll be talking about some science diving that you can actually get involved with yourself, which would be very cool. We've also got a new series coming out with videos aimed at advice and travel coming soon. So keep an eye out for them on our channel. But basically, all I can say is thank you very much for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you at the next live stream. Stay safe.